Kevin told Sebastian Young that they could either go their separate ways amicably, or he, Clarissa Pratt, and Clyde Davis could humble themselves enough to follow him. However, Sebastian and Clarissa continued to mock their combat skills, prompting Kevin to ask Dalton to teach them a lesson. After seeing Dalton strike both Sebastian and Clarissa with his fusion hammers, Paul Vaughn, Wayne Ford, and Harley Shepard were upset and embarrassed with how things had seemingly taken a turn for the worse between their students. While Sebastian and Clarissa were wincing in pain, Dalton walked over and sneered at them for insulting their abilities earlier, but having nothing to show for it. You were hiding your true strength all this time at the Healing Arts School? The calmness on Sebastian Young's face had been replaced by complete shock. Weren't you looking down on us earlier for our lack of experience? Well, it's our turn to look down on your abilities now. Serves you right for underestimating us. Dalton Steele's tone was full of sarcasm. Looking at the two men, Kevin shook his head. He felt uneasy about the whole situation and believed that he and Dalton had already made their point clear to them. Dalton, that's enough. Don't waste your breath on them. Anyway, it's getting late, so we should leave. Kevin looked serious, as if he didn't want to stay here any longer. Kevin, how can we let them go so easily? Don't you remember how arrogant these two were just a few moments ago? I don't think they've learned their lesson yet. Dalton rubbed his palms together, showing no intention of leaving. What else is there to talk about? We just needed to teach them a lesson. There's no need to waste our time and energy with them any further. Kevin was obviously very anxious. He pulled Dalton's shoulder and motioned for them to leave. But just as they were about to turn around, Sebastian suddenly took a deep breath and forced himself to stand up from the ground. Kevin, don't be such a hypocrite. If you have the guts, why didn't you kill the two of us right now? Stop pretending as if you developed a guilty conscience all of a sudden. Hearing this, Kevin remarked without turning his head. I never care what other people think when I do things, so it doesn't matter to me whether you think I'm being sincere or hypocritical. Either way, you lost this fight, so it's your choice whether you want to keep living or not. I'm moving forward, and the battle isn't over yet. But if you die at the hands of the Pinnacle, don't blame me for not saving you. You don't need to worry about whether I'll die or not, Kevin. Anyway, I doubt that you'd be able to kill us today. If you do and you're lucky enough to get off this island alive, you'll surely regret it. Due to Sebastian being so agitated, he spat out a stream of blood halfway through his sentence. Tell me, why would I regret it? Kevin suddenly became curious as he turned around and slightly raised his head to ask. Why don't you take a guess? I'll give you a clue. Who do you care about the most in your life? Sebastian gave him a mischievous smile. When his voice fell, Kevin was suddenly stunned. There were only a few people that he cared about. His parents were protected by experts from the Radiants. Aside from that, Adriana Wright and the other people in his trusted circle were probably under the protection of Xavier Marshall and his men by now. The only one that he hadn't accounted for was Lily, who was currently still in a coma at the hospital. What are you getting at? Kevin's tone suddenly became serious. What's going on, Kevin? Dalton asked in a daze. However, Kevin didn't answer his question. He continued to stare at Sebastian Young and slowly clenched his fists. I'm giving you one last chance to tell me. Don't test me. Kevin narrowed his eyes with violent intent. Did I finally provoke you? You've been calm all this time, so I really want to see what you're like when you're angry. Sebastian dared him fearlessly. Clarissa Pratt placed her hands underneath her body and slowly got up from the ground and leaned against a big tree, saying, Kevin, if you kill us now, I'm sure that she'll soon be buried with us as well. After all, if the entire Foundation sees this, they'll cast you as a traitor for slaughtering your teammates and believe that you've joined the Pinnacle. When she finished speaking, Dalton finally understood what they were thinking. However, before he could react, Kevin had already made a move. He stepped on Sebastian's shoulder with force, causing his chest to cave in quite a bit. Are you sure I won't dare to kill you?" Kevin's tone had completely turned cold. "As I said, if you have the guts, then kill me already. I'm not afraid to tell you that as long as I die, your wife will never live to see another day." Sebastian's face was covered in blood, but he continued to taunt him arrogantly. Kevin took a deep breath as he tried to control his temper. To be honest, he really wanted to kill Sebastian right at that moment. If he didn't get rid of him as soon as possible, he was sure that there would be endless trouble between them in the future. But although Kevin wasn't afraid of Sebastian or even the entirety of the Southwest School of Healing, there were still many people around him who didn't have the strength to defend themselves against them. Furthermore, the biggest problem was just what Clarissa Pratt had said. If Kevin attacked now, he was afraid that he would have to bear the responsibility of being called a traitor for the rest of his life. As such, no matter how much he would try to explain himself to the Foundation, no one would be willing to believe him or fully trust him ever again. "What do you want?" Kevin didn't remove his leg from Sebastian Young's shoulder and asked with a condescending tone. "What are you asking us for? Don't you want to kill us, Kevin? Why are you suddenly so afraid?" Clarissa asked with a laugh. "Come on, let's see that temper of yours." "What's the matter with you?" In a fit of anger, Kevin couldn't help but wave his palm and release a strong wave of spiritual energy at her chest. Clarissa Pratt instantly flew backward and broke a few trees along the way before she finally fell to the ground. With blood flowing out of her nose, she fainted shortly thereafter. "I'm asking you one last time. What do you want?" Kevin asked again. "I want you to be my servant. Are you willing to trade your wife's life for it?" Although Sebastian was currently being stepped on, he still had a lot of confidence in his words. "What the hell? This guy is too arrogant. He'll definitely start behaving after I hit him again," Dalton said as he angrily took out his fusion hammers again. Watching this scene from their monitor, the other leaders of the Foundation couldn't help but whisper amongst each other. "What's going on? Such a crucial moment isn't the time for them to settle their personal scores." One of the leaders shook her head in disappointment. "That seems to be the top student of the Southwest School of Healing, Sebastian Young. I heard that he's always so composed and his power base is also very high," another pointed out. "It seems like he was ambushed by someone. Who is that person standing on top of him? Is he from the Pinnacle?" A third one gasped. After all, outside of the Healing Arts School, Kevin had never been seen anywhere else within the Great Powers. So despite his reputation, the number of leaders present who had actually seen his face in person could be counted on one hand. However, Wayne, Ford, and the others kept their thoughts to themselves at that moment as their brows were almost knitted together in silence. Despite seeing the footage on screen, none of them could figure out what had happened between Kevin and his teammates. What was he so angry about? At the same time, in the hall of the Swinton family's mansion in St. Louis, Catherine Swinton was sitting in a chair and looking at Thornton Huxley, who was kneeling on the ground with a complicated expression on his face. "Did you poison them?" Richard Swinton wiped the sword in his hand with a piece of cloth. "Father, the matter hasn't been thoroughly investigated yet. Why are you in such a hurry to accuse Thornton?" Brenda Swinton asked with some reluctance. 3 hours ago, Susan Williams had apparently been poisoned by something she ate during breakfast. As she now lay sick in her room, the entire Swinton family's mansion had been placed under lockdown to find the culprit. Under Spencer's leadership, the people of the Radiance had already surrounded the entire compound and started interrogating everyone one by one. And until they found out who did it, nobody was safe from being a suspect, including the Swinton family. After previously threatening to kill Alan and Susan Williams just the other day, the most suspicious person at the moment was naturally Thornton Huxley. However, without any concrete evidence, Richard Swinton couldn't say for certain whether it was really him who had poisoned Susan. "Mr. Swinton, I wouldn't dare lie to you. I really didn't do it." Thornton lowered his head and denied any involvement in the incident.
Do you expect me to believe you right away after the stunt you pulled the other day?
Richard raised his eyebrows and slowly turned his head back to look at Brenda.
You've been watching over him these past few days. Did he do it? You should know very well in your heart if he did, right?
Brenda didn't know what to say. Father,
Brenda, don't lie to me. This matter concerns the life and death of the entire Swinton family. Don't you dare do something that you'll regret for the rest of your life just because you feel sorry for him.
Richard waved his hand and interrupted her. After Susan Williams had been mysteriously poisoned during breakfast, the entire Swinton family's mansion was placed under lockdown by the Radiants. With everyone being treated as a possible suspect, Richard Swinton confronted Thornton Huxley. But despite being the most likely culprit after previously attempting to kill Alan and Susan Williams, Thornton denied his involvement this time. Since his daughter Brenda had been watching over Thornton for the past few days, Richard asked her whether he was guilty or not. He then warned her not to lie just because she felt sorry for Thornton. Brenda Swinton felt like a fishbone was stuck in her throat and couldn't speak. After spending a lot of time with Thornton these past few days, the relationship between the two of them was indeed much closer than before. Although Brenda didn't openly accept what Thornton had previously done against Kevin and her family, she also considered everything else that had happened to him recently. Since the annihilation of the Huxley family, Thornton had turned from a young heir of a wealthy family into a stray dog in an instant. Knowing that this was the main reason why he sought revenge, this matter had caused waves in Brenda Swinton's heart.
Mr. Swinton, you don't have to pressure Brenda into speaking anymore. I can assure you that I had nothing to do with what happened to Susan Williams earlier. After so many years, you should know me by now. If it was really me who had done it, I would have definitely done it the same way I did last time.
Upon saying these words, Thornton immediately pursed his lips and straightened his back. He didn't want to appear too disheveled in front of Richard Swinton. This might be his only attribute that reminded others of his previous status as the young heir of the Huxley family. Thornton then looked at Brenda and continued,
I would never poison someone behind their back. This kind of despicable act is beneath me. I've already heard enough from you, so there's no need to keep explaining yourself with regard to this matter. Besides, don't think that I've forgotten your offenses against not only the Swinton family, but also the Radiants and Kevin.
Richard kept staring into Thornton's eyes as if he wanted to see them twitch to catch him lying.
Mr. Swinton, you can't be serious, right? I already told you that I'm innocent.
Thornton had never acted so tough in front of Richard. At this point, it was obvious that the destruction of the Huxley family had caused a change in Thornton Huxley's temperament, especially when his anger was provoked more than just a little bit.
As I said before, you're the prime suspect. So if you are in fact guilty, I must do everything that I can to get you to admit it.
Richard slowly narrowed his eyes.
After I'm done with you, that's the only point at which I'll look for other possible suspects. I won't stop until I find out who did this.
Hearing this, Thornton gave him a disdainful look.
I can't let you frame me for something that I didn't do. You seem to have a lot of confidence in your words.
Richard noticed the change in Thornton's tone and suddenly had a very bad feeling in his heart.
Anything is possible. Don't you think so, Mr. Swinton?
Thornton sneered back at him. Just as the two of them were in a deadlock, a staff member rushed into the room. He immediately knelt down on one knee and lowered his head to Richard Swinton. Mr. Swinton, we've just confirmed that Mrs. Williams was poisoned with yellow cobra poison, the staff member reported.
What did you just say?
Richard was stunned for a moment, then quickly came back to his senses. He grabbed the staff member's shirt, lifted him up from the ground, and glared at him in disbelief. The doctor said Mrs. Williams' food had traces of yellow cobra poison all over it. the staff member replied with a stutter.
It can't be.
Richard's hands were trembling nonstop. He threw the staff member to the ground and stumbled a few steps back to lean against the wall. The atmosphere in the room suddenly became very cold. Almost everyone knew that the yellow cobra poison was one of the deadliest poisons produced by the Zucker family. However, it was also known that of everyone in the entire Zucker family, Frida Zucker was the only one who could concoct this type of poison. Therefore, there was no need to investigate the identity of the person who poisoned her, as Richard Swinton had already determined the real culprit.
Mr. Swinton, are you still planning to try and frame me for this?
Thornton asked with an arrogant smile. However, there was a somber look in the depths of his eyes. It was just that no one else had noticed it.
Frida Zucker must pay for this.
Richard took a few deep breaths and clenched his fists. Richard, don't be so impulsive. Catherine Swinton instantly sensed that he was up to something. She quickly walked up to him and held his arm with her hand.
Let go of me. Frida Zucker jeopardized all of our lives by daring to poison someone under my roof. Today she must face the consequences for her actions.
Richard roared angrily. This matter has yet to be confirmed, so don't let your emotions affect your decisions. After all, the Zucker family isn't an ordinary power. You have to think about everything carefully before making a move. Catherine tried her best to dissuade him. Richard only stopped when he heard this. Although the Zucker family's current strength couldn't be compared to the Swinton family, Frida Zucker's reputation in St. Louis had been very strong in recent years. With the two of them helping each other, it would indeed take a lot of effort for the Swinton family to eliminate her in one go.
Then what do you think that we should do? Alan has done us a great favor by saving your life many years ago. If something were to happen to him or his wife in our home, how can we live with that shame?
Richard closed his eyes and tried his best to calm himself. Go and inform the people of the Radiance first, then try to contact Kevin. If you really want to deal with the Zucker family, you have to get him back here in St. Louis. Catherine was not just a supportive wife, but a sensible and wise decision-maker in her own right. She had thought of all of this in such a short period of time.
All right.
Richard patted the back of Catherine's hand. Just as he took 2 steps forward, he turned around and gave Thornton Huxley a meaningful look. When their eyes met, Thornton's heart suddenly skipped a beat, but he forced himself to hold his breath and not let Richard see any change in emotion. However, Richard Swinton didn't say anything to him. He simply let out another deep breath, then left the room to go speak with the people of the Radiance. Back at the island, Kevin was holding on to Sebastian Young's hair and kept throwing him against a tree trunk with force over and over. I already gave you a way out, but you still refused it. Even if I give you another chance now, I'm sure you won't be up to any good. Kevin nagged as he rammed Sebastian into the tree once more.
Kevin, just give me a quick death already. Otherwise, you won't only have to worry about the Foundation getting their hands on your wife. I'll personally make sure that both of your lives will be used to atone for what you've done to me today.
Sebastian responded as best he could despite struggling for breath. We can discuss that if you're able to live past today. Kevin said this without any change in expression, but his hands exerted more and more strength each time he picked Sebastian back up and threw him into the tree.
Kevin!
Dalton Steele threw Clarissa Pratt on the ground and wiped the blood on his face. Kevin glanced at Dalton and understood what he meant by calling him. Knowing that he couldn't let himself get too carried away with punishing Sebastian, he quickly let go of him and stepped on his back.
Is that all you've got, Kevin? Now that you've attacked me, it's already too late. Whether you can survive the rest of this battle or not, you won't have any chance of turning the tables and redeeming yourself in the eyes of the Foundation.
Sebastian seemed like he was determined to get the last laugh despite his miserable state. Like I said, you don't need to worry about this. Before he could finish his sentence, Kevin suddenly turned around. His eyes shone with a dazzling light. "Since you're already here, why are you still hiding in the dark? Come out here and play." Dalton's eyes widened when he heard this. He then gulped in a panic when he felt the tip of a sword touching the back of his neck. "I never thought that the people of the Foundation would end up killing each other under such circumstances. What a dumb move on their leader's part to trust their younger generation to work together in this battle," a voice suddenly rang out. A second later, 5 or 6 figures quickly emerged from the woods.